Okay, special episode.
Yeah, hey Julie, how you doing?
Pretty good. I'm excited as can be.
Oh, are you?
Yeah, because we're going to talk about the thing that's like near and dear to my
Well,
heart.
okay, which is what?
We have to figure out what the words are for it
Yeah,
first. So
yeah.
you called it.
Well, I wrote down here, see, here's total transparency. This is the sum total of my notes.
I have no notes.
Well, okay, but I just like to write. I mean, what
It's
is
okay
that?
to have
I
notes. I
like,
just don't
I
do
like graphology. What is, yeah, I mean,
graphology.
yeah, I like to write. Yeah.
Yeah.
So I called it the physics of change. And then you said,
I said we don't want to privilege. Yeah. Okay. So what are we talking about today? We had this idea of talking about what are kind of the natural laws? See, I think physics of change privileges physics, and I feel like physics already has a lot of privilege
what do
in
you
the world
mean
of
by
science.
privileging? Oh,
I
I
mean,
see.
like it has a lot of
Gives it
status
a
in the
lot of
world of
status, right?
science,
Yeah.
and it kind of makes you think, oh, it has to be like this objective thing. But I think what we're talking about is finding the natural laws. It's not just any kind of change, though. It's not just for change, it's for like change that has to do with people,
Well,
right?
right.
Because we're not trying to find the natural laws of like how an atom changes into an ion.
No,
Right.
but
What kind of change are we talking about?
well, the change that occurs in societies,
Yeah.
in people, in societies,
Over time.
in people living as a group. And I guess how I started or how I came to think about this is that, here I am in Northern Virginia and people are just going bonkers with many good reasons about what's going on with the new Trump administration. And they're like very unhappy and they're, I like to say they're doing a Daffy Duck, one of my favorite Looney Tune characters.
Like what?
Daffy Duck would always just go out of his mind. I'm assuming Daffy is male, but I'm not. I think
It's unclear from the
it's
voice.
it's unclear. But that, he's like, he just throws a total rant. So in my working life, I would when I was in a meeting and I was feeling a little bit of temper, I would often say, "Well, I don't want to do a Daffy Duck on you." And of course, people are, "What are you talking about?" But anyway, everybody right now is doing a Daffy Duck, and Daffy's favorite phrase was, "You're despicable," right?
Yeah.
Yeah. So about everything that Trump is doing, that he's and his administration, that he's breaking everything. In fact,
I wouldn't say everybody's doing that though.
well, yes, but a lot, yes, thank you. A lot of people, and we'll get into that. A
Yeah.
lot of people are doing it.
Yeah.
And while there's part of me that totally is with that camp, there's still a part of me that I believe can step away from it and go, when a system doesn't change for decades,
No.
when change comes, it's rarely pretty, it's
No.
rarely
Yes.
incremental,
Yes.
it's usually really messy. And so I think that's the first thing I said to you about there's something to be talked about. And that's where I used the phrase, the physics of change or the natural law of change.
Yeah.
Because,
Yeah. Oh, I'm so excited to talk about this.
yes, because people, by refusing to change, and that actually has to be unpacked because there's a lot in there, sort of bring this upon themselves.
Yeah, and it becomes personal. Like I have my family calling me saying, "Well, you live in the DC area and I want to talk with you about politics." And I'm like, "There's no chance in hell I want to talk with you about politics."
Yes,
Because I'm
yeah.
living in this place now where I didn't
Yes.
used to live. I'm living in this place now where like I can't get away from it. So the last thing I want to do.
That's really good because you came from Northern California to this environment about 18 months ago, maybe? Yeah. And so you can describe firsthand what it feels like to be in this environment
Yeah.
when you've not ever really been in this environment
No.
before.
Yeah. Yeah. I will. Do you want me to do that right now?
Yeah.
I'll tell you right now. So I always, everyone's circumstances are different. My circumstances where I was living in this small town that was largely agricultural and touristy town, Sebastopol, California. Um, with like chief products from the town are apples, or apple cider, um, grapes
Mm-hmm.
for wine, and now pot, right, which is
Mm-hmm.
legal to grow in California. And so lots of recent money in the town and stuff. But when you live out, even outside of the town part of that small town, in the country part of that small town, uh, but you still have neighbors, you find that you need all your neighbors. Every single one of your neighbors
Sure.
you need. Sometimes you need the neighbor that knows everything about the trees in the area because you got a tree that fell. Or sometimes you need the neighbor who um, happened to be a healthcare practitioner because you got to answer some questions locally that you can't answer, from the information that's out there in the world. And sometimes you need your neighbor who's the structural engineer because they know how to deal with the Sonoma County board or whatever, right? And
Right.
so you need all your neighbors, and all your neighbors have different opinions, but you just don't talk about politics much
Right.
because what the proximal thing is, the most sort of nearby cause of your happiness is that you get along with your neighbors regardless,
Oh, I love that.
right?
What is the nearest
Cause of your
source of your happiness?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so, okay, so now I live in, move across the country. I feel this calling to go to the DC area. I live in Alexandria, which is a town. I mean, it's like a city town.
Mm-hmm.
Um, and God forbid you know your neighbors
Mm-hmm.
because they're going to want to talk to you about politics. The only neighbor that I actually vaguely knew accused me of being an evil human being because I would consider the points of view of the Trump administration.
Oh.
And so and told me she had to find a support group and stuff. It was and maybe she does, and maybe that would be good.
Mm-hmm.
But it's it's sort of all that people talk about when they don't know you because it feels like the proximal cause of this happiness, right? The local
Yeah.
cause of
Right.
it feels like that,
Right.
even though I don't think in this case it's true because it looms so large in the
Yes.
environment. People feel like it's true, but really, if people got to know their neighbors and actually said, "Wow, this other neighbor, Trump supporter, but also um, very interested in, other things that I find very interesting."
Exactly.
Or this neighbor, Democrat, but,
Yeah, well,
kind of
both
into,
sides,
yeah,
uh, in certain places have demonized the other side and or have othered the other side
it's an othering.
and are not thinking of them
As
as
people,
multidimensional
humans.
people with
Yeah.
multidimensional interests.
Yeah. And I think it's going to create in the next few years, I mean, I think the country is ready to heal from this, but it's going to take, I'm not, by ready, I mean, like, I always have these
I
timelines.
hope I can be this optimistic.
But the country has to be ready to heal from this because it's not going to survive otherwise. And so,
Well, that I can agree with you.
right.
Yeah, our choices are healing to me almost seems like too strong a word. It's kind of like maybe sort of recuperating or
Recovering.
rehabilitating
Yeah.
or something because healing does imply kind of a returning to a previous better or previous gooder state.
Yeah.
And I don't know,
maybe we're never there.
I don't know that we can ever really
Well, we have to question
heal.
whether we were ever there, or
Exactly.
was it a falsely healed
I mean,
state?
because
Like after the Civil War, did we ever get
yeah,
there?
another thing I wrote down here. So I wrote down dams break. So it's what it feels like right now to me is a dam breaking.
Yeah.
And then the second thing I wrote down was that apparently being the status quo affects your hearing.
Yeah.
Because
You can't friggin' listen to anybody.
because you can't listen to anything. You don't hear anything.
Yeah.
And you don't even tune in to the right channels. So clearly there was something going on in the country that great swaths of liberal progressive people who would call themselves liberal and progressive, and I call myself liberal and progressive,
As have I in the
you
past.
know, and
Yeah.
they clearly had no idea that the country was seething against foreign aid, or, you know, huge parts of the country were seething against foreign aid. And they also had no idea that this transgender issue
Was breaking apart the country. Yeah.
had become I don't even know how to describe this, had become a lightning rod.
Yeah.
Well, this has been in the papers,
Yeah.
that the websites for the Department of Defense have been expunged of any references to homosexuality, so that the B-29 that dropped the atomic bomb on
Enola Gay.
Hiroshima, Enola Gay, is been expunged, and that
Well, but let's
and
let's be
that
clear.
there's a
Let's be clear.
conference being held at the Gaylord Hotel,
Well, hold
a
on.
Nashville, Tennessee-based chain, where supposedly people are I mean, I feel
No.
for the poor Gaylord,
No, hold on.
but I've heard that. People
No.
have told me this.
No, right. But just to be clear, those were on a list that were flagged by AI. That doesn't mean they're actually being expunged.
Is that right?
Yeah,
That
yeah.
they were flagged by
Yes,
AI?
yes. And
Well,
so
then,
a human being can go through that and say, oh, that's the Gaylord Hotel or that's the Enola Gay.
oh, okay. Now,
Yeah.
see, there's a very good example
Yeah.
of people not hearing
Yeah.
or fully understanding the
Well, you
story.
come straight into, I mean, so this is the thing, when you go all Daffy Duck,
Yeah,
this is an emotional reaction
on both
to,
sides.
on both
On both
sides,
sides.
100,000,000% on both sides.
Yeah,
There's an emotional reaction to a group of people who feel like they've been out of power for a long time,
exactly.
coming into power, and a group of people who didn't realize that they were in
Yeah.
power for a long time, losing power. And they're like, wait a minute, we were in power. We felt always
Yeah,
we always felt
exactly.
defensive.
Yeah,
And
I mean, it's like the area that is open for discussion has been narrowed down to this area of approved topics. And
that was
the
true
status
before the Trump
quo.
administration.
Oh, no, I agree. I'm actually talking about that.
Yeah, yeah.
The status quo didn't mean to do that.
But it
Didn't
happened.
mean to give other people the impression to do that. Some would argue with me that the status quo did mean to do that. Right.
Yeah.
But in any case, by saying that these are the only things we can talk about, you've really created this resentment that is like almost impossible to heal from. I just want to finish with a totally inappropriate joke.
Excellent. Finally, Carmen can tell this joke.
No. That someone was saying, we were talking about the Gaylord and the Enola Gay, and then some wag popped up and said, well, don't let them know about Transcom. Transcom is actually a military command. It's the name. Transportation Command. And so, oops. You know, so I mean, it is a good joke, right? It's a good joke.
That is a good joke.
So I don't know what to do. I mean,
I don't think it's inappropriate.
It's a cycle. It's it's just gonna. I don't know if there's any way for people in power not to make these assumptions about, now that we're in power, we get to define truth. I mean, this affects both sides.
Yeah, this is
right?
what happens. Yeah. So what do you have to do to get in power? You have to make friends with some source of money, right? And
yeah, I mean, we're talking about national political power.
Yeah. You make friends with some source of money.
Yeah.
So no matter who is in power, if what you have to do to get in power is to make friends with some source of money, then of course the definition of truth is going to change, right? And so I don't know, is there a way that we could have it be that to get in power, you don't have to make friends with some source of money?
Well, I mean, all these things have to be legislated or decided by the court.
Yeah,
And there's like, there's no magic wand you can wave. It either gets legislated or decided by the court.
right.
And the court made a decision, I don't know how long ago, where it decided that, allowed for all these political action committees
Yeah,
to establish themselves with limitless sources of funding.
yeah.
And so that has
Shaped what's going
shaped what we have
on
now
both sides,
on both sides.
every side.
Exactly.
And so I just see an independent party emerging in this country that is going to be interested in stopping that. And I was just hearing, okay, Steve Bannon.
Yeah, no, you sent the link to me. Gavin
Yeah.
Newsom's
Interviewing
conversation
Steve
with
Bannon.
Steve, and I had seen the headline, but I hadn't listened to it. Have you listened to it?
Yeah. And one of the things he said is, he was raised up as a Kennedy Democrat. Everyone I knew was a Democrat. And that's because they were for the working people. And the way in which that has really switched, at least in people's perceptions of things,
Right.
when you talk to Democratic scholars or people who study policy, they might say, no, the Democrats have always been for the working people, but the Republicans have painted it so that it looks like the Republicans are for working people. But communicating what your friggin' policy is kind of the responsibility of the party.
Right, exactly.
And that I think could come down to one of our rules of, does this lead into one of our rules of change?
Well, we have one rule already that if you don't, well, what is our rule? Well, you go ahead.
No, let's finish out that rule because
Well,
you were talking about.
I say, one of the things I like when I talk to groups about, being a rebel at work and uh, which is all about how do you persuade your organization to change the way it does its work before it's destroyed by new ways by innovation, basically.
Yeah.
And I would ask a group, I would say, hey, if you had to describe the relevant environment around your organization, what's the rate of change in that environment every year? Like it's changing at a 10% rate or a 50% rate. And they would often say, oh, it's changing at a 10% rate a year. That's
Really? That's their perception.
a common answer. Sometimes they go up to 50%, but
Right.
10 to 20% would be their common answer. And then I would ask them, okay, so for your organization to stay relevant and keep up with the external rate of change, what rate of change do you need to do every year? And I get deer in the headlights.
It never occurred to them to ask
it never occurred to them to ask that question. Oh, the outside environment is not static, so we can't remain static. And so maybe
if we were going to keep up, maybe
we can't go quite 10%, but then we should like aim for 8% or whatever. And then I would ask them after this sort of the shock of that sort of wore off a little bit, I would go, okay, now what's your process for deciding how and what parts of your process to change every year? Because what you're telling me is that the way you do your value proposition has to completely transform every 10 to 15 years, which is like, which is like, they're like, they realize that they have no process for that.
Yeah.
So, they're
just going to keep doing their thing.
Yeah. So every organization, almost every status quo I've ever encountered has this like, we have reached our value proposition. Year one, they've reached their value proposition. They start to deliver it consistently. And year 10, they're still doing the same thing.
Yeah.
And that is untenable. And then along the way.
And so when they're talking about the change, they're not at all talking about the value proposition or even their processes. They're talking about like we fire certain people.
Exactly.
Right.
And then along the way, as I said earlier, they become deaf.
Yeah.
They lose the ability to listen.
Yes.
And they even lose the ability to change the channel.
Yes.
They can't even imagine how to do that.
Yes. I have a friend working for this right now.
Oh, really? Yeah.
Yeah. There's like, she's told them like, here are the circumstances under which I will stay with your organization because I know you love me. And they're like, great. And then they don't.
They don't do it. Yeah. So one one, I don't know what to call this, and I don't want to get trapped in the, oh, we'll just come up with a fancy, cute term for this. But uh, people really overestimate the lifespan of whatever their best practices
We're
are.
going to call this the power of the past.
I like it. The power of the past.
Yeah.
So that's one.
The past has too much power. The past success has too much power in our thinking about our future. Yeah.
And then my little indent under this is that the status quo becomes death.
Yes, that was the corollary. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. Or the next.
Right.
Okay. So my sense is that that we are always going to, so here's another change thing, is something like help me figure this out. It's something having to do with how as long as we're doing power over or power to be different from, rather than power towards something or power with a community, as long as we're doing power over, like by which I define as kind of like trying to control things.
Well, it's my favorite thing, the desire to control others.
The desire to control others. As long as we have the desire to control others.
By the way, that's not my favorite thing.
No, that's our favorite point.
Yes,
But as long as we are working with the desire to control others and we think that's going to be the process by which we do change, backfire.
Yeah, exactly.
So I would say I would call that it's sort of wishful thinking. Like if I could just have my way.
Yes.
And I'm just going to do the things that I think are right without letting them breathe through the system.
You know how I thought about this, and I did for a couple of years have a position of like power, like in an organization where
Can I use this as a Kleenex?
Yes, but it's a little grungy, but
No, it's
go
okay.
okay.
I'm drinking tea.
So anyway, so people would pay inordinate attention to anything I said,
Yeah.
and
That's disturbing in itself.
And it's disturbing, but it's also
not like because of who you are, but just when anyone pays inordinate attention to what anyone says.
It's also disturbing in a way that I enjoyed it. I liked it. I liked that feeling of.
You're saying it bothered you that you liked it?
Yes, I both liked it and it bothered me that
Yes,
I liked
I
it.
get it.
And I,
Me too. Yes.
I tried to be humble, but there's no way to even think I'm going to try to be humble without that phrase is just full of ego.
Yeah, how do you try to be humble?
It's just
I'm so amazing.
It's just infused with ego.
I'm so amazing that I have to really attempt to be
yes, exactly.
So hard.
Yes. So but one thing that I came to, which I think was healthy, was for me making decisions on behalf of the organization. I found that to be not kind of easy, not because I knew what to do, but because I came to understand that if I don't get the ball rolling by like making a decision, then we get sclerosis and nothing happens.
So like it's not so much what the decision is.
Exactly.
That you have an action.
It's that I have created momentum. I have overcome inertia. And then I realized pretty quickly that all these other great people in the organization would adjust, would figure it out, and get move it over this way or move it over that way. And so I realized, my job is not to be the all-powerful wizard. My job is simply to overcome the inertia to get the ball rolling so that everybody else can do their jobs.
Okay, write this down. Write this down.
What is it?
A leader's job is to not be afraid to act.
Yes.
The direction of the action is actually not so important as long as the other people working with them are competent.
Yeah, that's actually a leader's job.
Yeah. Is to not be afraid.
Is to not be afraid to act. I like that.
Yeah. And if you don't have people who are working for you or with you and with you who can then competently adjust, course correct, you're in trouble, right? Then you're a bad leader because you don't have those people.
Yeah,
So
well,
that's my defense of Doge, and is like, like attitude is kind of like, okay, we have
you're
to.
defending Doge?
Sorry, I
What?
can do both. I can do
I
both.
just,
But like when I'm in a position where I want to defend Doge because someone's talking to me
I,
about how disaster it is, it's like, you know what? It's fast action that's super messy.
right.
What I would prefer is that it were done with more love. What I would prefer is
Oh,
it would be
yeah.
done with more awareness and a story and a clear story that says we're going to
Mm-hmm.
take this fast action because we need to. It's messy, and then we're going to clean up the pieces later.
Right, right.
Like I think you could be transparent about that. I think you could say that. I do think that's what's happening.
Yeah. Well, and I even think Musk has said that. He said that we're gonna make mistakes, but we're gonna be transparent about them. Well,
The transparency thing isn't going so
I
well.
don't think that's going that
The
well, right?
transparency thing is not going so well.
Yeah.
Also, what they're finding, anything they're finding that's positive isn't getting out there. So like I mean, the bulk of the federal government is a bunch of people trying to do their jobs really well. And so
That is
that
correct.
information is not getting out there. And
Exactly.
that's what I mean by not doing it with
Well, that's
love.
not the red meat
Well, there's
that
also,
the feeds their supporters,
well, hold on. That's exactly right. So that is the Daffy Duck on the other side.
Yes.
And on when I say the other side, I mean different from the Daffy Duck of the libs,
Hmm.
right? And so it's I think we need to grow up.
Well,
And
you're just making me think that's really our problem. We're in a Daffy Duck America. We're totally in a Daffy Duck
well, it's
America right now.
emotional maturity all the way down. It's like
Yes, it is. It is
we are
emotional
stripped
maturity.
of emotional maturity because, and I'm gonna blame it on Silicon Valley.
Oh,
I honestly, I mean, ever since the smartphone and the addiction and the reduction in attention span, there's also been a reduction in emotional maturity and the expectations of emotional maturity of our leaders.
it's really interesting, Julia, because emotional maturity is related to attention span.
Mm-hmm. And
And
can you have the
attention
long now?
span
Can you? Yeah.
is related to the smartphone.
Yeah. So and also being shown, um, like
Yeah.
emotional maturity being immaturity being highlighted as sort of like
Mm,
that gets you an influencer role.
yes.
This
Yes.
is bad for us. Like you could put a
Yes.
bunch of monkeys and have
Yeah.
them. This experiment has actually, I suggested this to a primate researcher. I won't say his name. Um, I said, put a bunch of, chimpanzees in a cage and have next to them just 24/7, like news
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
and BS shows that are
Mm-hmm.
basically about
Mm-hmm.
emotional immaturity and track their behavior and see how it goes.
Yeah.
He said, I won't do it. It's unethical because I know what'll happen. Because they could do
Uh,
the same thing with having them watch monkeys or, I mean, chimpanzees who are alive and in an extra cage who are more aggressive. And then the
mm.
original ones just become more aggressive and copy them. So it's monkey see, monkey do
Yeah.
all the way down.
Right. Wow.
So, yeah, we have and this is, so I think we made in this country a deal with the devil when we did what is it called, Section 320?
I don't know.
The internet thing that says companies aren't responding, Silicon Valley
Oh, the one
companies
they're not responsible
for their
for
content.
the consequences of the content. Yeah.
Yeah,
Or even the provenance of the content.
yeah.
Yes.
And I think that was, I understand why that was made, and I think that screwed us. And so I think we have to undo that somehow.
I think you're making, I mean, I will reflect upon what you're saying, but you're making a really strong case here.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So it gives me chills because it makes me sad. And also just like people's lives have been destroyed by this reduction in emotional maturity. We don't expect people to be emotionally mature anymore.
Yeah. I was interviewed yesterday or Saturday by someone who's looking into sort of kind of the CIA and the internet and sort of how technology came to the intelligence community. And I was sitting there during that time and we were talking a lot And, George Tenet, the director of the CIA during the period of 9/11, had the idea that we need to get some of that silicon energy into the CIA. So a lot of these people show up, and I'm like one of the few analyst types who has like any digital literacy. So I spent a lot of time with them. And they got all these great ideas for how they can immediately change us. And I'm like, I'm sympathetic to where you want to go, but you have no idea
How people work.
how
Yeah.
people actually work.
Yeah.
Right.
Right.
But they just kept churning and churning and churning and then ending up with nothing. But they probably had a learning that informed their next step. But
Yeah, they learned how to
you're right. I
manipulate
mean,
minds.
I've long been, yeah. I've long been very cranky about you talked about the attention, lack of attention, and I've been very cranky about the kind of entertainment society
Yeah.
that has developed.
Yeah.
I
yeah.
I ride the metro, not infrequently, and in the past, I was riding the metro right when the transition from newspapers to like the very first iPhones came out.
Yeah.
And I would count, okay, how many people are reading the newspaper in the metro
Yeah.
in like 2003? And
Yeah.
now today, how many people, every single person
Is looking at their phone.
is
Yeah.
looking at their
100%.
phone. And I'm guilty of that too, although I'm clearly sometimes looking up to see to count them, And
So how are you going to meet your neighbor?
exactly.
I mean, how are you going to meet the people on the train? I mean, so you could develop all these opinions about someone who seems so distant
Yeah,
from you,
yeah,
even though they're right there, because you're not talking to them or notice. I mean, so
yeah.
I think I secretly, like many people, I think, not secretly anymore because I'm going to say it out loud, but there's a part of me that's like fantasizes about what happens if there's an electromagnetic pulse and we all just like have no electricity and we have to meet each other again. We're all immediately devoid of our phones. I'm not saying this would be good. I'm saying there's a fantasy world in which, like my son, he sees old movies
Mm-hmm.
where no one's on their phone
Oh, yeah.
and he's like, everyone seems happier. I'm like,
Yes. Yeah, exactly.
people are depressed. Like it doesn't even Silicon Valley executives don't give phones to their kids until they're older because they know what it does to
Yeah.
them. I mean, this is a this is an addiction that our whole country has gone through. That is
Yeah.
something we all share.
Mm-hmm.
It's good. It's left or right, I don't care. You're scrolling for news about your team. But it's an addiction that we have to deal with.
Mm.
So, okay. So,
All right, so we've got a few things.
so you know what the rule is?
What is the rule?
Technology doesn't change people.
But it does.
Technology doesn't change the rate of change. Yeah, you're right. Technology doesn't change the rate of change that people can handle. It changes people's ability to cope with the rate of change in a negative way.
Technology
That's too
doesn't.
long. So
I
let's
know.
figure that out.
Doesn't. Let me go on the other side.
All right.
Go on the other side of the paper.
And we shouldn't just say technology because it's not true of all technology.
No.
So we should say, what is the underlying rule? The underlying principle is that though we think we can change people by nudging them, which is really
that
this,
whole nudge thing.
the behavioral
Oh my
economics of
God.
nudges. I just have this to say to behavioral economics. Just because
Oh my
it's just-
God. Oh.
like the nudging thing is just like
Yeah.
offensive to me. It's like, oh, well, we know the right direction. We have decided that everything's this simple control system and it's not complex. And so therefore our opinion of the direction that things need to go is correct. And therefore we're going to use this nudge based on some BS equation. I'm sorry. Fuck off. Sorry.
Okay, so what's our
I might
thing?
have to edit all that out.
Yeah, well, I don't know. Technology doesn't change.
Nudges. Let's start with nudges. Even technological nudges don't change us in the desired direction. How about that? Are very unlikely to change us in the desired direction.
And are also don't change us, but are also have just this whole panoply of unintended consequences.
Yeah.
I mean, you know what we did with nudging and all and smartphones is we started playing with fire with like no real concept.
Yes.
none whatsoever
Yes.
of how it was going to change
And the same
society
thing is happening with AI.
and people. And the same thing is happening with AI.
Right. And
Well, this
so,
is encouraging, isn't it?
well, but if we can recognize, like, I mean, I just keep hammering down, like, if you think that this is a simple system that you know how to nudge, you are wrong.
Yeah.
I mean, just you are wrong. It's not,
You
there's
are
no
wrong.
defense for thinking this is a
That's
simple
right.
system and that you have the answer for how to nudge it.
Yeah.
Which is, by the way, I think going to lead to a resurgence of understanding. I mean, once people really get it that this is a complex system, a resurgence of understanding why intuition is so important. Because
Yes.
intuition is
Yes.
coming from the complex
Yes.
system itself and feeding through our very healthy unconscious mind.
Yes.
And so has a better clue
Yes.
than your equation.
Right. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay. Well, so
I
I
think
don't want to.
maybe we've reached a good point here.
Yeah, I do
Because if
too.
we keep talking, we're
We'll
gonna
kind of.
get to like diminishing return land
Yeah, I agree. But
and to overthinking land.
right, but I kind of want to know what our things are. Did you
Well, you know
rewrite?
what? I'm gonna when I go back and edit it, I'll write them.
Because
I tried to write down some, but I think
I
I missed
know.
something between the power of the past, the status quo becomes deaf, and leader's job is to not be afraid to act.
Right.
I think something happened there,
I think
but I
that
was waving my hands too much,
yeah,
and
I
I didn't
know.
catch it.
I think that when we're talking, I find it almost impossible to
Yeah.
track analytically what we're
Yeah,
saying.
yeah, emotional. And then we've got emotional maturity, attention span.
But if
So
you're willing to go back in there
yeah, I
and
will do
pull
it. And
out the
then maybe
thread,
I'll put a nice slide there at the end,
ooh,
ooh, where, that'll be exciting. Yeah,
yeah, because I think our final caveat should be like, we have no idea whether any of these things are true, but they're what occur to us.
exactly, exactly. And so in that way, it is truthful.
Yes.
Now you need to show them the Pandas Plain Cello mug. And if you don't subscribe to Pandas Plain Cello, we'd really love you to. But we'll keep doing this regardless, I guess.
Yeah, and you can make your own pandas mug. We don't sell merch.
Yes, no, we don't. Absolutely. All right. Well, it's great.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really fun.
Yay. All right.
Fun.
Fun, fun, fun. So I'm going to stop the recording.